Now, in a quiet moment, collect your things. Not the objects that refuse to leave you, the lamp, the books, the little shells that follow you year by year. Do not bring the streets that call you, the green bridge over the channel, or the buildings at sunset in whose warm doorways you would like to linger. You are afraid of forgetting, but you know these streets already. They withhold none of their secrets. Neither does the harbor, although it is dark under the piers. Instead, gather up the rain pelting the sound. Find a way to carry the mist, and with great care, fold together the corners of fog drifting down over black hemlocks. Let it catch in the branches of your mind, so that maybe at your destination, it will rise and travel a while beside you before dissolving into another form. That poem grew out of my great love for the Pacific Northwest, where I grew up, especially the weather, the gray, foggy weather. And another thing I love about that city is the Space Needle, which of course everyone knows pretty much as the iconic piece of architecture in Seattle. And this is called Space Needle for Stephen. If each foot took us back a year, the dark below would be immaculate, like a hole in space instead of stars, or a jar of colored glass someone shook and scattered in a dream. But from this height, our childhood town spreads out, a silver galaxy, and tourists peer into the giant metal scopes. I scan the towers, walls of windows, one small pane, sofa, tiny people face to face, a man and woman talking, as they may do every day, or perhaps this is the last time, or their first. The lamp she crosses to dims the room a darker gold. It's like watching movies on the wall at home where we cavort across some stretch of sand. I want to step inside the frame and take my own hands and look into my eyes and see what's true and what's idealized. What should we try to be? If we looked down through time instead of sky, would we see ourselves behind another pane, our faces gazing back through days or years until we recognized that room, the lives we've lived in all along? The wind is off the sound and makes no sound except a ruffle at the rail edge. On the tiny street below, a man is working on the road. Alone behind his truck, lit by a magnesium haze, he turns a little orange wheel, some apparatus out of sight. He is the perfect model of a man, which means we love his task in ways that he cannot, and wish to close the shutter on the stars, our years, with something like his gesture of repair. Some of you may know that this afternoon Levon Helm passed away. And for some reason I was thinking about this poem in relation to him as I was driving out here. I only met him once. My husband, who's a songwriter, was a huge fan. And we met him because a friend of mine from high school was often played with him in the Levon Helm band. And so we had the pleasure of meeting him last summer, I think it was, or when they were playing at the Flynn Center. And I don't think I ever thought about this in relation to writing this poem, which was written a number of years ago, but somehow it reminds me of the passing of a great soul. So I'd like to think about him tonight. Letter from the shore. We're out past the old town line. a block from the railroad tracks, and trains rattle the shelves every couple of hours. Nights are getting colder, the ice grown thick below the dam, fishermen bringing huts and lanterns, towing enormous shadows. I've been down for a closer look, saw them kneeling in the dark with buckets, spears, and the openings they cut are little doors at which they seem to listen, or you could say, almost pray. Usually they're quiet, careful silhouettes against the glowing shacks, but here or there a man will stand, suddenly pull up hand over hand a silver dripping jewel. Sometimes a lamp or two wavers from the rest, lining the darkness toward another constellation, and bits of conversation break on the edge of the causeway, impossible to understand. Out among the stations, one man raised his arm to me, the gesture crossing his ice blue flame, a semaphore, and from here, of course, what I tell you is wrong. I will never cross the ice to learn about gear or weather, or what the men might say to someone on shore. Night wears on, the wind increases, some of the lights will leave. Near to, another train will barrel through. The sky will have damped out half the stars by far, and when this letter reaches you, send a mortal flare. Tell us where you are. Tonight there's a number of people here who've been to the Vermont Studio Center. Many of you may know that organization, and I had the pleasure of being there this last February. And this is a poem that came out of being there in the dining hall, and it's dedicated to Todd, who is sort of head of making everything hospitable. A really great guy. Spring arrangement for Todd at VSC. Empty after the breakfast rush, the dining hall returns to silence, like a church without its congregation. A spare light falls on the blank chair rungs, blocks of little ladders leading nowhere. From its corner, the old grain scale stares into space. Its round clock face has reached a standstill. Outside, clouds passing, puffy fluid bursts from a vast steam kettle. Metal roofs across the road burn off their dull snow patches. Carrying a bundle of winter branches, you enter through the kitchen door, a woodman in a fairy tale. Across the waiting tables, you dispense your prizes. Now the quiet breaks to the clipped and able sound of your garden snips, editing out the stunted, what doesn't bloom. You plant them in vivid water jars around the room. In a week, green leaves by the hundreds will explode, coaxed to the light like art that follows silence, dormancy, with clean winds and camaraderie. In college, I was sort of a renegade English major, and by that, I guess I mean that I kind of made up my own major, loosely centered around English. And so it was that I really hadn't read much Keats, and about 2 years ago, I was just thumbing through a book of animal poems and came across his poem, which I'm sure many of you know, about the cricket and the grasshopper, and it has a wonderful line in it that says, "The poetry of earth is never dead." And I thought, wow, is that true? Especially in light of the environmental issues that weigh heavily on the minds of so many of us, I think, right now. And I thought, wow, we are ruining so much of the poetry of this earth. Can it really never die? But as the poem showed to me, the realization that I eventually made around that question was not the one I expected. The poetry of earth is never dead. Keats, 1816. Rank on rank of corrugated sheds. Below the interstate, crane-like dinosaurs shuffling freight. Boeing liner plows its furrow overhead. The poetry of earth has changed, and I admit, I love the boiler plant at night, blinking silver safety lights. 5 billion more of us to rearrange. Crickets carry smelters' metal in their brains. Who reigns a century from now is up for grabs. Statements from official labs imply it won't be us. The poetry of earth has changed. The rain a litmus test, not tears from heaven, a gesture of rebirth. What will our poetry be worth? The poetry of earth is never dead. It overtakes our own. Flooded terminals, the grass returning. No human voice to parse what's less than symbol on the blowing pages, city walls. Unless the hexapods rise up, begin to read. And this last poem, Cape Cod, has become a big favorite of mine living out on the East Coast, I think because all the fog and water reminds me of Seattle. And recently I visited the place where the Pilgrims supposedly drank the first fresh water that they had found in what would become the United States. I think this is the first attempt I've ever made it even slightly political poem. I'm not sure we can really call it that, but first water of the new world. Only a marker now, no sign of the spring, and we arrive by way of pitch pine, a narrow path of marsh grass. Winter berries flame above our heads like gems, like hallelujahs, proclaiming a final harvest and the coming age of winter. In just 1 month, our little hotel will close for the season, too close to the water's edge, storms sweeping up the Atlantic. Even tucked into Plymouth Bay, the men who landed here scarcely beat New England winter, and half the colony died. Over the scarp to the province lands, the outermost grass and dune, and the wide sand shows how the old world fell away, its sins renounced behind the blank horizon, the sky a clean slate. Those who drank the water here believed in heaven's plan, the virtue of their 7 houses, single street that scrawled out clear as any letter their intention never to go home. From this vantage point, we know what will accumulate: debts and massacres, outrageous notions of self-rule, and a slow translation into myth that pundits still employ to prove how far we've fallen from the goal. Down the road a mile or two, men are free to kiss and hold each other's hands like other married couples, while giant strands of Christmas lights are run up Pilgrim Monument, honoring a holiday the Pilgrims banned. The lights will shine for miles at the almost empty beaches. Tonight we'll see them from the pier, then walk the town, and linger in our favorite bar, where faces violent with conviction flash across the little TV screens. We'll wish the world could be reformed, and later look for comfort in our single room, the clean and open bed. Even here, in our private state of two, we rehearse our faults. There is no spring in which we bathe and come out new. Outside, the dunes refuse to speak on human questions, and the only prayers are the winds, worrying the frayed screen door. The tide begins to rise, pulling over the glacial shore its vast erasure, a kind of amnesty. Thanks.